Hello and welcome to another edition of NYBJ Media Watch. I'm your co-host, Eric Tait, and with me is...
I'm Bob Anthony, co-chair.
Co-chair of NYBJ Media Watch, and this is Media Watch done by EVT Educational Productions in association with the New York Association of Black Journalists. And we come to you every other Monday. Bob, what's on our agenda for this edition of Media Watch?
Well, a couple things moving around, especially with City Hall and the recent judge's decision that the stop-and-frisk policy, which you and I have been talking about here for quite a while.
Media Watch stays on stop-and-frisk, folks, so you know, I guess we will primarily be doing stop-and-frisk on this edition of Media Watch, in addition to other things.
Right. And the judge basically backed up what you and I and lots of other people have been saying, that it inappropriately singles out people of color for inappropriate stops and stopping and frisking where it doesn't, with the necessity for it isn't there, basically.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, folk, I didn't get the full judge's opinion as it was stated from the bench, but we have an excerpt that it would be actually good to get a brief quote from.
Little verbatim.
Yeah, we're lifting some stuff from Richard Prince's journalism because he does a good digest of a lot of the stuff that breaks that we know should be of interest to journalists and to the general public. And so this was his last week's bit of coverage. And the headline was, Judge Rules Policy Singled Out Blacks and Hispanics. And it reads, the stop-and-frisk policy that a federal judge in New York ruled last Monday unconstitutionally singled out blacks and Hispanics. And it was opposed by the New York Times and the black weekly New York Amsterdam News, that ruling by the judge, but supported editorially by the city's tabloids. The judge's ruling was supported by the Times and the Amsterdam News, and it was opposed by the tabloids,
being the Post,
the Daily News and the New York Post, and of course, and by the Fox television news station, WNYW-TV. Now, as you and I know, Fox happens to be owned by Rupert Murdoch, and we don't really call Fox News, we call Fox faux news. So
we basically dismiss them when talking about journalism,
and
because
real
journalism
news.
isn't practiced there.
That's
so
right.
We'll knock that off the ledger for the moment.
But not surprisingly, they were not happy with the judge's ruling. Outside of New York, the policy was portrayed as of a piece with the racial profiling that some say led to the Trayvon Martin shooting death in Florida and countless other profiling incidents around the country. The article goes on, quote, for those who doubt scholarship matters, the ruling that found stop and frisk unconstitutional specifically referenced Michelle Alexander's book, The New Jim Crow, which we have discussed on this show a few times. William Jelani Cobb, the historian, professor, and author, wrote his Facebook friends. It's also worth noting that the ruling included a block quote from President Obama's speech regarding the George Zimmerman verdict and a footnote referencing Charles Blow's column on Trayvon Martin's death. This is what Cobb wrote on his Facebook page, and this is what's being quoted by Richard Prince in journalism. As Colleen Long reported last Monday for the Associated Press, the nation's largest police department illegally and systematically singled out large numbers of blacks and Hispanics under its controversial stop-and-frisk policy. A federal judge ruled last Monday, while appointing an independent monitor to oversee major changes, including body cameras on some officers, which is another little twist to stop and frisk that the general public was not really fully aware of because we didn't dig into it as much as we could have.
Right.
But some of these officers are wearing body cameras.
Right. Little, very small cameras that
like
just what it says. Fits on the body.
Boutonniere type.
And it records what happens in front of the police officer. That's the little piece of technology that's starting to catch on.
Right. Mayor Michael Bloomberg, quoting, said he would appeal the ruling, and they're working on filing those papers even as we speak, folks, which was a stinging rebuke to a policy he and the New York Police Department have defended as a, quote, life-saving crime-fighting tool that helped lead the city to historic crime lows. I'll have another aside on the historic crime lows in a bit.
Okay.
The legal outcome could affect how and whether other cities employ the tactic. Quoting, the city's highest officials have turned a blind eye to the evidence that officers are conducting stops in a racially discriminatory manner, U.S. District Judge Shira Scheindlin wrote in her ruling. Quote, in their zeal to defend a policy that they believe to be effective, they have willfully ignored overwhelming proof that the policy of targeting, quote, the right people, unquote, is racially discriminatory. Stop and frisk has been around for decades in some form, but recorded stops increased dramatically under the Bloomberg administration to an all-time high in 2011 of 684,330, mostly of black and Hispanic men. Mm-hmm. The lawsuit was filed in 2004 by 4 men, all minorities, and became a class action case.
Exactly.
So that's the quotation on the judge's ruling and the reaction by media and by academics. And so...
And of course, Bloomberg's reaction was apoplectic. He was just angry as heck that the judge somehow couldn't see it his way. And Police Commissioner Raymond Kelly as well. Both of them expressing their anger at the judge, directly at the judge,
That's correct.
as if it was a personal matter.
It was a personal affront to them.
Yes.
And of course it was a personal affront because the judge said they willfully ignored all documented evidence that this was unconstitutional and discriminatory. They willfully rejected it. So of course it was a personal attack. The judge held them up for chastisement.
Right.
So, and they realized that they were being chastised, and so they got very upset. Mm-hmm. But you know what makes me even more upset, not just as a journalist, but as a black male, is that a number of reports have come out that basically stated that Commissioner Ray Kelly and his police department decided that this was not about, quote, getting guns off the street, as Bloomberg keeps positing. It's about planting fear and intimidation in black and brown males when they walk the streets of New York, just to intimidate them. And they have been quoted as having said that. I believe Eric Williams, or one of the officials who were in one of those briefings, actually came out and had a press conference to that effect. So, correct me if I'm wrong, Bob. Bloomberg and Kelly were making the talk show rounds following the judge's rulings, talking about how they so effectively got guns off the streets just by stop and frisk, and only because of stop and frisk. And then I believe when some of the journalists, not necessarily on the talk shows they went to, but in other iterations, broke down their statistics, their record for getting guns off the streets from the millions of stops that they were made was so abysmal. It
was microscopic.
It was, if you use that to get guns off the streets, we'd be overrun with guns in the city of New York, and the country would be in a
If that's the type of net, that kind of wide net you're going to cast to catch so little, it wasn't working, is what their own stats were saying.
It was not working according to their stats.
Yeah.
The flip side on the statistics, what was it? 1.1% of the stops may have produced a weapon found in black males.
It was
1.2 might have produced a weapon if it was a Hispanic male, and 1.4 of the stops would produce a weapon if it were a white male.
Right.
So now the question we ask as black males, why are you stopping more black and brown males when you're getting less guns than when you get stops of white males? You get, even though statistically infinitesimal difference, but you're still getting more guns when you stop white males. Why are you not stopping more white males? Why is that not your target population?
Why isn't that part of the plan? I mean, if that was if they're going to use these numbers as part of the plan, then everybody should be in the net, not just people of color.
Based on statistics,
And so it's
you're
not.
a numbers guy, Bob. Break it down. If you get 1.1 guns from blacks,
It doesn't. The numbers. You're basically intimidating 90x% of the people you stop, if that's what you're looking for, because they don't have any weapons. They're not posing any threat. They're doing nothing to harm the community, which is what you're looking for when you stop people, but they're not. So you're basically irritating the people of color, the Black Latino community, ostensibly for their own benefit.
supposedly,
And
according to
And I don't
Ray
feel
Kelly,
I don't feel any safer knowing that I can be stopped and frisked at any time. My degrees don't help me there. I'm a tall black man, so I can be stopped and frisked at any point. According
if
to
your
this
skin
plan.
is black and brown, you are the target population for New York City's stop and frisk program,
Right.
period. So
Right.
it has absolutely nothing to do with how many degrees you have. It has absolutely nothing to do with how much education you have.
Right.
Has nothing to do with any actual documented effective policing, because I went to a town hall meeting about 8 months ago at Touro College on 125th Street. Borough President Scott Stringer brought together a number of criminal justice individuals from John Jay College and some other people from around the country and local community leaders, and basically they did an assessment of effective policing, and at least one criminal justice professor over at John Jay, I believe his last name is Kennedy, he pointed out the fact that effective police departments around the country don't target 98% of the people. They target 2%. They know the 2% bad apples that are in their particular bad neighborhoods.
Right.
And so what they do for effectiveness is they try to have good relationships with the 98% of the people in those targeted communities
to get their aid and
to
looking,
get their aid and
looking out.
cooperation
Right.
and help, and then they push hard against the 2% bad apples, because they know who the 2% are.
Right.
They know they're dealing with the drugs. They know they're dealing with the gangs. They know that it's affiliation working out. But even that working outwards, it's still 2% of the larger community, and so
Right.
they don't alienate the 98% of those communities, and they get a heck of a lot better results across the country than New York City and its quote stop and frisk. That's been documented. So why Bloomberg and Ray Kelly continue to hawk this stupid, and I call it stupid, baseless line about making our community safer by getting guns off the streets. It was also documented a few years back that the gun buyback programs netted more guns when they were purchased. Just bring your gun, we won't ask you any questions. They got more guns off the street in the gun buyback program than these people got in their stop and frisk programs. So
You basically took those weapons out of play.
they
I mean,
did,
they weren't
and
there
they
to
got
be-
more of them.
Right, they weren't there to be used for ill will. I mean, they were basically taken out of the population. Those guns that people
They-
took the money for.
But it was designed to get guns.
Exactly.
And guess
Exactly.
what? It got
It
guns.
actually worked.
So
I
I
mean,
don't
you're
know.
not going to get everything on an offer like that, but
No,
you're going to
no,
get some.
no.
But it's going to be more effective than
But we're talking
1% or
effectiveness.
2%.
And you're not alienating the community you're supposed to be
Right.
protecting and serving. There's a whole thing about protect and serve. That's the quote mantra of the former mantra of police departments around this country. The police departments that used to be protect and serve exist no longer, thanks to policies like stop and frisk, and thanks to the SWAT mentality that came in out of the LA Police Department. Now around the country you have a proliferation of SWAT teams with a paramilitary outlook on police work as opposed to protect and serve outlook. And so you're living in a paramilitarized police state in 99% of the cities in the United States of America, just because it's no longer protect and serve. It's paramilitary, jackboot, occupying force mentality.
Well,
And
it seems to be cyclical because, I mean, at the height of that mentality, you had the MOVE case in Philadelphia. I mean, that was the ultimate case where the SWAT tactics took over the mentality of how that issue was going to be resolved. There wasn't going to be any negotiations. It was just a bomb dropped on a building.
well, it's interesting because that MOVE case was actually not quite SWAT, Bob. Because
It wasn't?
Yeah. The interesting thing was they actually had people in the community trying to negotiate with the people in MOVE. They had some city council people. They had some lawyers. They had some community folks actually trying to talk to those people. The problem was they were recalcitrant and did not want to come out.
Okay.
Now, the decision about the bomb.
Right. Now, see, that takes it. Yeah.
I take you back historically because I did this in-depth investigation for 2020 when I was with ABC News. And what happened was the police chief, the city administrator, I forget what his full title was, but he was like the guy over the police chief and the city administrator, blah, 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 chief and the mayor, they got together and they had the discussion on how they were going to deal with this. And they tried the fire department with fire hoses.
Okay,
Now, they
that
put
didn't-
fire hoses on that building
Okay.
day and night and whatever. I mean, and
Right,
that didn't
sure,
work.
that
It didn't
work.
budge.
Right. No one moved.
And then the discussion was then, okay, maybe we could try some sort of explosive device, concussion device, noise-making device that might work. And so there was the big discussion, and they went, oh, yes, okay, we will try this device. And there was a big discussion, incendiary, napalm, etc., and the word was no fire stuff, no napalm, no
Right.
X, Y, and Z.
Right.
And
Right.
it didn't quite get down to the guy who was building the bomb.
Okay.
And so this particular individual, he just opted to put napalm in that bomb.
And drop it
And guess
from-
what?
Right.
They burnt down an entire city block.
Right.
And they killed a lot of people. But it really wasn't SWAT tactics.
It wasn't SWAT tactics.
Yes,
It was just
because
SWAT
it was
tactics.
they flew a helicopter
Right.
over and
Okay.
dropped a bomb.
Okay.
And in that instance, SWAT tactics might have been
Might have been,
better.
right, because
I
that
say
would've-
that, and I'm chuckling because you don't want either type
Sure,
tactic.
sure.
Because
You never
as
wanna get
one
to that
woman,
point.
I'll never forget this woman. The woman, there are two quotes. One woman said, "To drop a bomb to get people out of a building, how?" I mean, the woman was irate, and then the other one was just heartbreaking because all those lives were lost in that
Right.
in that compound. This woman, the woman, I mean, it just ran through me when I screened that for her. She says, "Whose hands is this blood on?"
Exactly.
And it was, I mean, I still shudder to this day the way that woman, she was just screaming in pain. Whose hand is this blood on? Because they killed a bunch of people
Right.
in that house. That was, but that kind of mentality, okay, let's drop a bomb.
Okay.
That's what we're talking about, a paramilitary state of mind.
Right.
In our police departments these days. This is NYBJ Media Watch folk.
Yes.
Bob Anthony, Eric Tait.
And we have about 10 minutes.
Probably we needed to at least folks know what they're watching.
Yes.
To get back to the Kelly making the rounds about how this is effective policing, and now they're getting a tool that's out of their hands. I don't know how many of the media coverage. Tell me your assessment of some of that media coverage that was that Richard Prince alluded to about this side was pro the
Right.
judge and this side was not anti the judge's
Well,
ruling.
what I was happy about was that a lot of some of the best reporting was on social media, was being tweeted and was being Facebooked and was being put out there on.
What were we getting right after the judge's
Well,
ruling?
we got the numbers we were talking about. I mean, when they were
percentage
we
breakdown?
had different analyses of the numbers and different ways to look at how ineffective the numbers were. Just if you're going to look at it,
If you just basically deal with
strictly
5 million stops,
right, strictly
how
statistical.
many people? Just statistics.
It wasn't working, and that's what I like. That was the good reporting I saw on social being tweeted, and by the smaller think tanks and research houses.
Yeah.
But of course, I didn't expect the Post to come out anyway in support.
You mean
of,
the New York Post?
Yes, yes, correct. Not
I,
the
I always try to
Thank you.
label them as accurately as possible,
Thank you.
because we did a lot of talking about the Washington Post on the
Right.
last issue.
Right.
So I presume we still have continuous viewers, and
Sure.
so we don't want to conflate the
Sure.
New York Post and the Washington Post.
Sure. Now, the Washington Post does their research. The New York Post, unless news happens right in front of their building, which you did yesterday with that car crash, I don't expect good reporting out of that house. So that's I'm not surprised by their position on stop and frisk anyway. They're not really a New York paper as
They're an Australian paper.
like the old Dorothy Schiff New York Post was when it was owned. When it was a good paper years ago.
I call it the Australian paper because, as far as I'm concerned, Rupert Murdoch is just an Australian. Even though he managed to get United States citizenship so quickly and so smoothly, so he was able to own more than one media outlet in a major market, which was forbidden by FCC rules. We keep going back to that issue, folks, just because we need to make sure people remember that
the rules were actually adjusted, I believe.
they were
to make
bent
sure
for
he
him.
Right.
They didn't bend the rules. What
Right.
they did was they helped him become a citizen so quickly so he could continue his gobbling up of media properties.
Right. And we refer to journalisms. That's it's easy for you to Google that journal -ISM journalism. It's a very good column that
Richard Prince.
Yes, puts together the news of the day weekly, I believe.
I think it's at least 3 times a week.
Okay.
And I guess it's depending on what his workload
What his
is in
workload
trying
is.
to aggregate
Right.
this stuff.
Right.
It doesn't come out every day, but it comes out more than once a week.
No, but he
and so
covers-
there's some
he
weeks
covers
when you
things
might see
extremely
3
well.
postings, and some weeks where you might only see 2, but you never just get one.
Right.
And I like the fact that this is an African American veteran journalist who ranges the gamut from international coverage to national to drilling down to the local stuff.
Right.
Whether it's local Chicago or local New York, he aggregates really good stuff. And the reason why we use him as a good source is because we know he does his homework. We know that he's going to quote the source from which he is aggregating.
Right.
And so you can always go back to the original source to double check. It's not like somebody tweeted something and you don't know where it came from.
Right.
It's not like somebody just popped it up on Facebook and you're not sure where it came from.
And he will
This-
make a big attempt to be balanced.
He
He'll fish out another story from the other side just to provide the balance.
Yeah, and I don't think it's that he's looking for balance. He just wants folks to understand that this is what's being generated out there in the journalistic ether.
Right.
And he gives you the quotes, he gives you the sources. And that's what we try to do when we say, okay, we're going to quote something from. And we tell you,
Right.
okay, this
Make
one's
sure
coming
we-
off of journalism's
Sure.
aggregation. And within the journalism, he will tell you he's picking up an AP quote. And we will try to make sure we give that to you as we've done in this particular coverage. But the interesting thing, we only got about 4 minutes, but the last part of that quote, stop and frisk has been around for decades in some form, but recorded stops increased dramatically under the Bloomberg administration. Look, I go back to this every time we do stop and frisk, but you understand that this is all about control. And that's intimidation, that whole bit.
Sure.
And it doesn't start in the 20th century with Bloomberg and Kelly, and before Kelly, whoever the other guy was. 'Cause I call him the other guy because they basically rubber stamp whoever the mayor is, and if the mayor is of stop and frisk mentality, like Rudolph Giuliani, they're going to have that mentality. But this goes back to colonial New York, when they passed black codes and restrictive laws that said that enslaved people, especially black people and Native Americans, could not congregate after certain hours, could not congregate in any number exceeding 3 at night, could not have more than 3 people at their funerals. And when the Africans who buried their people at night from their African traditions, they banned their nighttime funerals. This is all about control, folks. This is what they've been trying to do for 400 years to African-descended black and brown people, because it's all about staying in control. And when I tell you that I'm not pulling this off my head, because I had folk like Joy Elliott, who happens to be in the studio with us, and Ann Hayward, and a lot of young students researching this material for Then I'll Be Free to Travel Home, that epic documentary we did on who these African people were in North America. This stuff is right there in the historical records. It got so bad in New York City with this stop and frisk mentality back in the colonial days that the slaves actually revolted, and one slave accosted and beat the mayor of New York City almost to a pulp for passing that kind of law back in colonial days, all right? So if you see an uprising in the community as a result of stop and frisk, it didn't occur just
Right.
lately.
It's not a new
It has
concept.
historical precedent.
Okay.
So, but that's a historical context I need for our viewers to understand. This is all about control. It's all about controlling black and brown folks, primarily black and brown males. So, but all right, I think we beat stop and frisk to death.
I think so.
There were some other things that we wanted to get to last time, but we didn't, and part of which deals with journalism and what it means to the wider audience. Gwen Eiffel and Judy Woodruff were named co-hosts officially of the News Hour on Channel 13.
Absolutely.
And I don't know, it didn't get as big a wave in the general press as I expected, but it shouldn't have been anything of note anyway, even though people seem to think it was revolutionary.
It seemed like it was just the right move to make with the talent that they had and the talent that the people knew were associated with that show. So it just didn't. They're women, okay? They're
Two women,
yes,
and two women anchoring a major news outlet on Monday through Friday platform. PBS is a major news platform. A lot of people go to PBS for news just because they don't trust the cable networks. They don't trust the three regular networks.
Right.
I go to PBS just to get a cross-check and a balance of what the other people are doing. I have no great love of PBS either because they fall down on a job half the time as well.
Right.
But that's me, and because I've been a media critic for so long, I have a high standard. So actually, it's not that high. It's just I expect professionalism. I expect really good journalism. So if you don't measure up, I'm going to call you on it.
right. But with those two, I have a certain degree of respect for both. I mean, their body of work has definitely prepared themselves to be the co-anchors of a national show
Yeah.
like this.
Individually, they're great.
Yes, so
My beef with PBS is they keep giving me this he said, she said,
right.
just because they're looking for fair and balance. And there are times when he said, she said, and then my reporter has to say, and this one said something stupid, and this one said something actually correct.
Okay.
And that's our assessment, and we're bringing it to you.
All right, we have about 15 seconds, so we have about time to wrap.
Oh, okay. This has been NYBJ Media Watch. I'm Eric Tait.
I'm Bob Anthony.
And we'll catch you the next time. See you then.